So it's my pleasure to have with us this morning David Zilz, who is recognized as a hospital pharmacy leader in especially in academic health centers. He's the former director of pharmacy at the University of Wisconsin Hospital System. Notable in terms of our history, he was a keynote speaker at the Pharmacy in the 21st Century Third Conference that was held. He's a past president of ASHP and a former treasurer of that organization. He's also been recognized with the ASHP Harvey Whitney Award. So it's our pleasure to welcome David Zilz.
Okay, thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you. So we would like to learn about your journey to your recognition as a leader, to your leadership role in the profession of pharmacy. So maybe in reflecting on that, you may wish to include key events or people who influence you in your journey.
Okay, well, it started in pharmacy school when I took a pharmacy technician job at University Hospitals in Madison, and I met Win Durant, and I was kind of attracted to the program, and he at the time was pursuing the idea of having a residency program at the University Hospital. So he recruited me to be R1, the first resident in the program, and the first person to get a master's degree in hospital pharmacy administration. So that's where it started. And he was well connected with the pharmacy profession, was a ASHP president, but before that was very active in a number of state societies. So he got me linked into the association world quite early. And I think one thing that I might share that be of interest to the students, one thing he did to me that disturbed me a lot, but was the best thing that ever happened to me, he got me to be the chairman of the recruitment committee for farm membership services for the state society. And I was a farm boy with no interest in any publicity or anything else, but it forced me to get involved with associations at the very front end. I guess my advice to students, if you want to think about it that way, is if take on the worst possible job that you think you'd least like, because it'll probably serve you the best in terms of going forward. Through that connection then in the societies, I got involved with the state of society and then the national society. And then at that time, there was a early, I think, a kind of revolution, I call it, in hospital pharmacy. And I got connected with Paul Parker, Cliff Latchley, Bill Tester, and a number of people like that that were kind of on the front end of transforming what hospital pharmacy was to sort of the long path that we've been in since in terms of program service, clinical practice enhancements and advancements over the years.
Very good, very good. Well, thank you for that. So I often ask about legacy, and some people don't like that term, but another way to look at it, looking at all your contributions that help advance the professional pharmacy, what are you most proud of?
I think I consider myself being really lucky to be connected with the people that made things happen. And so I guess if I was to say what I'm most proud of was just being chance to connect with the doers, the people that could think things about what had to be done and then know how to get it done. And that happened early in my career. So I think that's, what I'm most proud of. Now, if I think of my legacy, I actually, on my 80th birthday, sat down and wrote what I wanted my legacy to be for the rest of my life. And I think that might reflect back a little bit to what I've done, I tried to do unknowingly. I decided that a good legacy for a person like me would be to connect ideas with ideas that other people did not know needed to be connected because they hadn't been involved with the number of activities that would allow them to see those different components that would have to be brought together. And then secondly, I thought, what's really works is to be able to connect people to other people that don't know that they need or should be connected. And then thinking through how things get done, it's how do you get connected ideas to connected people to make something constructive that's sustainable. So I think that's sort of how I look at my kind of my whole professional career and my life in general.
Very good. Well, thank you for that. So, and you already alluded to some advice for students in their professional journey. So, other words of advice, how they can develop as leaders. And when we talk about leaders, I'm talking often about little L's, not only the big L's. Everyone can be a leader, and leader is to help advance the profession, move us forward.
Well, first, as students, you take the opportunity to encounter every patient, the first person that you possibly can for the rest of your school and students. Every IPI, API, and other rotation that you can meet, talk to, interview, advise a patient, do it. It'll come back in different ways to help you no matter what route you take or what career path you decide to have at the end. I've talked to pharmacy students and residents that were involved with drug administration programs. 20 years later, they say their conscience works different in terms of what they see the need to patients. They make different ethical decisions. And a lot of it's just got to do because they had encountered some patients that had some need that they were helpful to earlier in their career, and it sticks with them. So I think it might raise your whole, I think, professional, ethical, uh, I guess I'd call it ethical framework in terms of your total career. So at this time, every patient encounter to the extent that you can. That would be number one. Uh, Number two, be focused on any school association or extracurricular activities that's involved with leadership. I see, and I know myself, I sometimes got too diluted and didn't think through in detail enough how to make things happen. Roger Anderson, who you may have talked to, and is sort of a person that I spend a lot of time with, says it's much, much better to do 2 or 3 things very well than 100 things that are haphazard. So focus pretty intently on any issue. I could refer you to a book by, I think it's Kahneman, that's called Thinking Fast and Slow
Mm.
as a good way to pursue any association activity or any other leadership activity. Another thing, it's a little hokey, but I find it kind of helpful to think about, is to think big, start small, and move fast and smart. Uh, that'll, if you put that in terms of your projects that you're going to be doing either as students or going forward as residents, it's a good way of thinking because sometimes if you don't think big on the front end, it's hard to catch up with all of the components that could be brought in. And then the ability to focus and think small on what's the best start. And then once you get that going, then you can figure out what are the next sequences and how do you make the program broader and more influence in any activity, program, project that you become involved.
Very good. Very good. That's great. Well, thank you for that. Um, so my last question has to do with, since this is embedded in a history course, as we study the decade of the 2020s in a few years, like other key events in our history, external events shape our profession, really creates opportunities and shapes our profession. How do you see, as we study the decade of the 2020s, um, COVID-19 pandemic playing out? In other words, I believe it will be a key event in our history and will be recorded in history. And how do you see that shaping for our profession, especially being an opportunity for our profession?
The first is I think we're never going to return to the old world of face to face that we have in the past. We've got to become very good at ever virtual aspect, whether it's meetings, learning patient care at a different level in terms of telehealth, telecommunications, Zoom, whatever. That whole world of not direct face to face is going to change, and I don't think we've got a well thought out plan yet, and it may be premature in terms of how pharmacy should play that out for each of its activities. We're going to always have acute care facilities. I think we'll go through an era and there'll be more face to face there. But a lot of the things that assume travel that were highly costly and non productive are going to change to a virtual base. And I think we need to spend a fair amount of time articulating how that's going to be done. One of the things that I think other professions are ahead of pharmacy is in what I call the tele world. And I see it, you know, you call it telehealth, tele whatever, but the telepharmacy thing is not clearly defined. And we haven't, I don't think, have a strategy well thought through in the profession in terms of how that might be optimized. We're working on it, but we're not doing it very well. The other area, I think now we're going to have a whole different view of population health. The statistics, artificial intelligence, all of the stuff that's evolved in the last 100 days has put a completely different speed on how we look at, forecast, and predict future telehealth issues. And so I think we're looking at it right now sort of through the virus lens, but I think a lot of the things we're learning now are going to be refocused in terms of cancer, diabetes, coronary, and all the other disease. I think population health and artificial intelligence are accelerated tenfold by the pandemic in a way that we won't really understand for a few years to come. I think the signs and symptoms are there if you follow a variety of different literature and the Hopkins and Washington and Idaho and some of the other statistical programs that are going on with their population health. I think that's a basis, but I think that's going to be a kind of a transformative thing. With that said, then how pharmacy gets involved, what its role is going to be, I think is going to be, you know, kind of hard to tell. I think the other thing is we're going to shift in terms of supply chain thinking to the patient differently and more aggressively than we have in the past. We're seeing it in consumerism. I think the same thing is going to follow very logarithmically, perhaps, in the pharmacy supply chain through the entire supply chain, but specifically how it ends up in the patient's hands. That said, then I think pharmacy's role could increase in terms of how do we increase adherence with the population that we're dealing with. I think we may also have to learn to be a little bit more diagnostic in our professional thinking than we have in the past. I think there's going to be some opportunities there that we haven't pursued. I think some of the models in terms of things we've seen with the community pharmacy and some of those will be transformed, primarily replaced by a different level of supply chain thinking. Pharmacy will become more of what I would call autonomous in terms of and the speed and the way medications are manufactured, distributed, and delivered and administered.
Yeah.
That's just a bunch of random thoughts. I had
Oh, no, but
to.
very good thoughts. Thank you very much. Well, it's been my pleasure. I don't know if there's anything else you want to say, final words of comments, remarks for our
Well,
students.
one of the things on leadership I might suggest is if you're really interested, think about a variety of different leadership activities and then do some reading on it. You know, a leadership in associations is one thing. Leadership in a department is something else. Leadership in outside organizations is something else. And so at one point in my career, I spent 2 years looking at different leadership activities in different forums, everything from church councils to to national organizations. So if you really have an interest in that, organize a broader thinking in terms of how to apply leadership in multiple different forums and settings, because at least based on my experience, every one of those connects and gives you different ways of thinking when you're in meetings and others in terms of how to approach issues. I was on the kidney foundation board. That was very important for the hospital. I was on a nursing home board. Issues I learned there connected back to the hospital. So every one of the external areas has a direct application. It's just a matter of how you connect the dots
Right.
in an activity. So I think that would be one of the things I'd encourage people interested in leadership. The other is get yourself a mentor and or a coach. And the higher you're interested in leadership, think more of the executive level coach uh, than just sort of a typical mentor.
Very good. Yeah, those are two great words of advice as well. I'm glad you mentioned those. Again, it's been my pleasure, Dave, and thank you very much.
Okay, you're welcome. I enjoyed it.